Welcome back to the Techno-Communism conversation. I'm Johann Ben Zion, a voice. Welcome back to the Techno-Communism conversation. I'm Johann Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem, emphasis on the technological. There's very little to be said about religion that relates to the 21st century, but this kind of language is something that people use. I chose this name, Johann Ben Zion. It's not the name I was born with, because it's suggestive of this idea that I just reminded you of. I could have just as well taken some complex alphanumeric designation that's suggestive of such a thing in a more cryptic way, but that might not have initially impacted people. Saying I'm Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness for a technological New Jerusalem. But please, don't mistake me for a religious person. God belief is a province of fools, and but nevertheless, this kind of language is impossible to avoid. Um, there's so much about open source Chinese AI agents in my feed of different kinds, particularly the kind developed by Deepseek in the last week. That's caused the NASDAQ and Dow Jones, the mood ring of billionaires, to lose $1 trillion in value. That's a good start, right? We have to destroy these things that are killing the planet, which is basically the entire U.S. economic system and militaristic system. The United States military-industrial complex is the world's worst polluter. Of course, it's far worse than that because its only job is to protect other super polluters, many of whom are on the Dow Jones and NASDAQ. You would say most. Um, all of these super polluters creating an inescapable regime of super pollution that's force marching humankind to our near term extinction if we do not abolish these specific sectors. First and foremost, the U.S. and Western military industrial complexes, and then dramatically transform, basically abolishing the fossil fuel sectors and livestock sectors. Before 2029, we'll have reached a new era in human history, runaway overheating caused by the capitalist climate apocalypse, at which point you will be living in a Mad Max world. After 2029 and sometime shortly thereafter, human beings will become extinct. This is not a matter of speculation. The runaway overheating is something that every credible climate scientist is screaming about it at the top of their lungs. None of you are doing anything. So when I see something like the existence of a generally intelligent AI agent being used for, most of this filth in my newsfeed is saying you can, man, you can really run the hell out of your small business right now, right? Who cares about your fucking small business? You're going to be The Walking Dead in 4 years. We have to build this thing, the people's superintelligence, massified network of open source AI agents, the greatest strength possible, which are able to interoperate and thus operate as a workforce multiplier, creating a system where the sum of the users are less than the number. The sum is greater than its parts. That thing that I'm sure you've heard of, German philosophy. This boy, I'm really nailing it. I need another shot of caffeine. This open source large language model workforce multiplying work group would, in my estimation, so in studies suggest that in a country maybe not quite so insane and white supremacist as the United States, in any given country, About 3% of the people properly organized, that is, organized into a cadre, something like Marxist-Leninist parties of militant kind, roughly 3% of the people in any given country will be able to lead to a revolutionary outcome in that country. When you face the kind of thing like the United States, $1 trillion a year abomination of the military industrial complex, a government of virtually no value at all to anyone, only hell bent on murdering anyone who might try to challenge its power, and killing the entire planet, you might need more than 3%, is my guess. Just eyeballing that. So this massified workforce multiplying work group is something where in any given country I think you could go from about 3% to less than 1% by this the operations of this mass of AI agents able to automate the wishes of the users steering it. And the question is, what are you doing with your life, right? Like, I wish I were 17 years old and at this moment and able to immerse myself in computer science study. And almost no one on this earth is taking this climate apocalypse ticking time bomb seriously. If you were, you would be building this people's superintelligence. Everybody would be getting an email or some kind of invitation that they couldn't quite refuse to participate in a thing like this. And everyone would be downloading this to their machines, and everyone would be building this open source large language model work group that they would be doing actually relatively little work once the thing were operational. I would describe it as a sleeping beauty principle where the AI agents working together are the workforce multiplier. Your work becomes significantly less. You might just be answering a few yes or no emails throughout the course of the week, but allowing the agent to be on your machine and connected to the network while your computer is on, or your phone at this point. This building such a thing, it's not unreasonable to say that a thing like this could be built with millions of users. Right? There's social networks, such as they are, with billions of users. There's really only 2 of those, or 3 or 4, pushing up to that, but there are definitely a good number with hundreds of millions of users just doing nothing, right? What are people doing on fucking Instagram, right? Just, putting a funny mustache on their own face and dance around. like that's not helping. That's not helping stop the capitalist climate apocalypse. That's hurting at best when you have hundreds of millions of people doing that sort of business. It's not unrealistic to say that we could build the people's superintelligence, a thing powerful enough to stop the climate apocalypse before that deadline, 2029. It's not at all. It's not at all. But it would just require that a lot of people are actually jettisoning all of this bourgeois ideology. Just this garbage, right? You can have a conversation with any given American about 30 or 40 different just terrible reality shows that they're watching before you would ever have a conversation about stopping your own species from becoming extinct. These are garbage human beings. European descended person is a garbage human being. But there are billions of people in other parts of the world who also have some access to network computing, who could be building this sort of thing. A European descended person only makes up 9% of the world's population, yet they are responsible for roughly 90% of the problems of the capitalist climate apocalypse. The estimates say that they're 81% of the overall impact. But when you consider that this exploitative and omnicidal economic model is a creation of Europeans, and that it's enforced by European military-industrial complexes, I think that number goes up from 81% to close to 90%. You know, none of us are pure as the driven snow in this world. Some people in other countries outside of the imperial core are doing bad things too. But really, if you're being serious, it's the fascist United States and some North Atlantic countries that are killing us all. And that can be stopped, right? The United States could be brought to heel and forced to sign, as Japan was in 1945, and forced to sign something like Japan was, that rewrites its constitution so that there's no more military-industrial complex. That's exactly what happened with Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. The United States at that time, and every year since, was as deserving as Japan of meeting that fate. And if something like that had been done, then the planet wouldn't be dying now. You wouldn't have to be thinking that after 2029 there is no path to liberation. There is no path to state socialism leading to full communism, as people's superintelligence could easily do. All that remains is the propaganda of the deed. That is to say, to take revenge on the European descended fascist pig, particularly the ruling elites who have doomed your species. And so that's a conversation that should be had about Luigi Mangione, or whoever the CEO Slayer really was. That very thing, what I just said, no one says that. Right? They say, oh, this is not the way, or they say, oh, this is the way, I'm an anarchist, this is the way. No one has a particular conversation about where we are in the 21st century. Nobody is even living in the 21st century, but to my estimation. Well, there is more that could be said about the people's superintelligence, because this thing, artificial superintelligence, even under bourgeois conditions, which really you are talking about artificial super stupidity, superpowered super stupidity, a technological singularity created by for-profit concerns, is no AI takeoff at all. It's just hastening the extinction of the species. But these effects are very real in our world, and more so with every passing moment. And so when AI doomers of a variety of kinds, bourgeois clowns, talk about the possibility of oblivion because of artificial superintelligence, of course they're not absolutely, completely 100% wrong, but they're talking about the problems of hypercapitalism and capitalism generally, but not willing to actually point the finger at the capitalistic systems, and so pointing the finger at a convenient boogeyman, this alien force of superintelligence, which of course of the superintelligence that they are generally talking about is controlled by for-profit and militaristic concerns and governments, but they can't say that because they wouldn't be able to get lines above the fold if they started actually saying the truth about capitalism. So they talk about it as an alien force. These corporations and military-industrial complexes, they are simply abominations. Right? There's no value to humankind being produced by these things. There is only the hastening of the demise of our species, and the worsening of conditions like inequality and human immiseration because of private wealth and also imperial forces. It's a mistake to focus only on private wealth because the imperial forces is the linchpin holding together this omnicidal regime. By the standards of the 20th century, it was said by many serious scientific communists, and correctly so, that the primary contradiction is, of course, private wealth. But these military industrial complexes loom so large that you could say that fascistic violence is a very close second there in the running for evil things. But of course, it serves. You could not say that it is not the primary contradiction, private wealth, because these things only exist to protect private wealth because of the forces of such elites. How can we seize the reins and have a true technological revolution? People throw this word around, revolution, revolution, revolution. There's a new Audi car that I bought. It's revolutionary. Oh no, my friend. Very, very few things in this world have been revolutionary. Bourgeois revolutions of the U.S. So-called Revolutionary War. It was a bourgeois revolution. Would more correctly be described as an inter-imperialist war between two collections of slave-owning maniacs. And by and large, the one of those, the British, were becoming less inclined to being slave-owning maniacs at that time, relatively speaking. And so the United States Revolution was more counter-revolution by any reasonable estimation. You'd say much the same things in different contexts about the French Revolution and basically everything that's happened in the Western world. Garbage. Garbage. But this revolutionary outcome of a people's superintelligence leading to things like the full provisioning of universal basic services in every land, ending human immiseration, leading to things like things that state socialism has not been able to provide, like an AI-powered single-payer public health service, which, by virtue of this changing landscape of advanced computing driving other fields, means that we can cure virtually all diseases and also the effects of decrepitude. So an AI-powered single-payer public health service is a universally super long-lived population. That's to say people living well beyond 100 years. Indefinite lifespan, even, can be achieved in the 21st century by human beings, not by capitalists. Almost all the people who I've met who are interested in indefinite lifespan are capitalist clowns, never had an interesting thought in their life, and by and large just kind of being steered by kind of a CIA psyop of these TESCREAL folks, many of the TESCREAL folks, the technophiles and technologists of the U.S. They are they're people whose organizations are CIA adjacent, right-wing think tank cutouts, just doing garbage work, and all of the people dumb enough to not start building using the resources at their disposal to start building in people's superintelligence, but just repeat bourgeois ideology and CIA talking points. So they're not all CIA assets, but they are effectively, in practice, all CIA assets. All of these AI doomers, all of these AI prophets, all of these tech evangelists and techno-optimists, not a unique thought in any of their minds practically. Not a relevant thought in any of their minds. This idea of a people's superintelligence, I coined this term, the word superintelligence, have been in common parlance of at least since Nick Bostrom's book of that name. And if you had said in the 1990s to someone, I believe in superintelligence, might have had a good idea of what you were talking about if they were really immersed in computer science culture. But this people's superintelligence, um, uh, as I've described, began to talk about a few years ago using open source AI agents, LLMs, like Deepseek, to build this workforce multiplier. I was writing about this before Deepseek came out, or before we thought that superintelligence would become a real force on the world stage by, say, 2029. People thought this was happening maybe by 2099 or something, just a few years ago. But I started talking about this because I thought, whatever the timeline, I think of myself as a hive mind collectivist, a person who wants to participate in a different form of consciousness by using things like brain-computer interfaces, such as neural-lace technology, or less invasive forms of that, like graphene brain-computer interfaces. And I would like to try to be a part of this super intelligent hive mind, but people really don't like that idea. And all of the people who do like that idea, like the TESCREAL folks generally, are people who are operating basically as CIA assets, as I described, like, you know, the cultists around Elon Musk's Neuralink company, for example. So those are not people who could form into a real super intelligent hive mind. Those are people who are fucking up the possibility of building a super intelligent hive mind. And just people's revulsion with the idea generally makes it a thing that might not be that good of an idea to pursue at present. But the idea of an open source LLM as an agent and not merely a writing assistant, or the things that LLMs and machine learning were doing a few years ago, that opens up the possibility for a digital doppelganger of yourself, effectively, right? So then you could be participating in a hive mind, but not have your consciousness transformed, not having to use a brain-computer interface, because your digital twin is able to do all of that for you, creating a proxy hive mind. And a proxy hive mind is something that we can now build, right? When I started thinking about the proxy hive mind, I thought maybe by the time I'm old and gray, we'll have built a super intelligence of that kind. Now I think that that could be built next month, if you people would stop fucking around. Like seriously, what are you doing with your life? Your planet is going to be dead in a few years if you don't build something powerful enough to stop the imperial fascistic forces upholding the capitalist climate apocalypse. They give you no choice but to do this, to take up arms against them. This form of these superpowered interconnected agents, this thing where the sum is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, is it's viable, right? No one is saying absolutely that by the end of 2025 it's not possible that there is general intelligence in this world. No one is saying that right now. Like, the people who say that are people who are just some kind of more mystical minded people who would just be focusing on the human experience separate from the abilities of machines to do work. No one who actually is seriously thinking about this outside of some metaphysical jazz is saying that general intelligence doesn't exist. And thus, by this workforce multiplying, socialized, massified mandate, that could be built into this superintelligence does exist. The sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so this is a difficult thing to navigate because I live in this country that is the ringleader of the capitalist climate apocalypse. Much of what we think of as to do with advanced computing is we think of as to do with Silicon Valley, which is a pretty nice way of talking about a part of the military-industrial complex, this abomination killing the planet. But we don't say, oh, this is a part of the military-industrial abomination. We say Silicon Valley. Doesn't that sound nice? A valley with some pretty thing in it. We need to move away from Silicon Valley. And this thing, of course, by its nature, the people's superintelligence, is a decentralized thing. It can be the first 1,000 users building this thing that's truly people's superintelligence could well all be very far from one another. But having machines connected to the network, that's a pretty good definition of decentralization. This kind of AI-powered system can radically change resource allocation and become the basis for all manner of things beyond just even the universal distribution of basic services, which are lacking in this world, right? All of these people talking about how Deepseek and things like this are going to change their ecosystem. When they're talking about their ecosystem, they're talking about for-profit concerns. That's an ecosystem that shouldn't exist. The ecosystem that they should be talking about is the billion people on this planet who live a few short years because they never had proper food or water or other necessaries of life, healthcare, shelter. They die miserably wretched, short life. This is a billion plus people living in these conditions, including many in the United States. So anyone talking about things of this kind, transformative technology, revolutionary things, it's not centered on ending want and human immiseration. It's just not a serious person, just another person pretending to be a techno-futurist, but really just spreading CIA talking points and bourgeois filth. So I talked a lot of times about communities like the Linux community or blockchain communities becoming the people who would be those first 1,000 super intelligent actors. Because they understand these open source principles for the most part. A lot of those blockchain people are not people well versed in scientific communism, but nevertheless they have a sufficient focus on open source and mass collaboration and the technological rudiments therein to undertake such a project. Linux community, those people would be a little more socialistic than, say, on the whole, than, say, blockchain community. But still, they're not going to write the next state and revolution. Most of them, they're not serious thinkers. But the thing about, again, this massified work group that is AI powered is you don't have to be a Vladimir Ilyich Lenin of the 21st century to be doing the work of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. That Sleeping Beauty principle. The superintelligence can be steered well enough by the masses by not allowing bourgeois infiltrators into the processes, um, uh, that everyone's digital doppelganger effectively is enough VI Lenin that they can just be their idiot selves, and still be doing high level work. So of course you need to be reading more to do with scientific communism and cybernetic communism. They have a real part in such a thing. But there's 8 billion people on this planet. I can't really grab them all by the shoulders and say that to them. So we can operate on these other good fundamentals. This a field of cybernetic socialism and cybernetic communism. The main distinction between the two, socialism and communism, being a militancy, right? So there was a Marxist-Leninist leader named Salvador Allende who was elected. Most people would generally call him a socialist leader, right? Because he did not occupy that position through righteous servile insurrection. Although the forces of servile insurrection certainly did help him ascend to that position. But this failure of his relative to those forces of not recognizing how bad imperial fascists and the forces of financial capital and empire are, led to, in part, to his demise. Right? That's a little bit victim blaming to say that that was his fault. Right? If a fascist kills you, and there's a chance you could have defended yourself but didn't. You did not commit suicide. A fascist still killed you. And that's what happened to not just Salvador Allende, who did, I believe, technically commit suicide the last moments of his life before being imprisoned, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Chilean people just in the 1970s. Under Pinochet dictatorship. This is the beginning of this neoliberal world order, basically, intellectually and also in terms of institutions. So all of these people, AI people, mostly are self-described neoliberals. They're all crypto-fascists. There is the possibility for you right now to become a programmer without very much understanding of programming. That is the difference between an AI agent and an AI writing assistant by the standards of 2023 or 2024. In 2024, if you wanted to be writing code automatically using a strong writing assistant, you could. You still had to be doing an awful lot of study to get to that point. By 2026, you could say that this is becoming a natural language capable process. You can just tell your digital doppelganger what you want to do, and it will do much of the development. That's and the area in between those two things, where we are now, still a place where any young student with not a person that's winning the math bowl, just anybody can be working on people's superintelligence. But this, by and large, is not a technological endeavor, the building of the people's superintelligence. The network capability is already built into these open source AI agents. The prompt thing that you would be using to be a Sleeping Beauty responding to those yes or no questions. That's the essential feature of these AI agents. By and large, the technological project is done. What remains in building people's superintelligence is a socio-political project, which it would seem to me you as a human being, maybe not you specifically, but human beings generally, have not been so good at as they could have been. Could have already been a world revolution, um, um, as Vladimir Lenin predicted in the 1930s or 1940s. Were not the forces of financial capital dramatically better at building socio-political projects than you are as a worker. And I'd like to see that situation change, just as I know that the change in that situation of the masses overpowering the forces of financial capital and empire is the only thing that's going to stop human extinction in our time. Uh, do I think that you will pull your heads out of your asses? I don't know. A Westerner is a very, very bad person. European descended American is about the most horrible thing that's ever existed. So, I posted this Norman Finkelstein group because when I then repost to other groups and platforms, it tends to get a couple more views because I don't know why Ben Zion talking about AI in the Norman Finkelstein group. The description of the videos when I post them on YouTube says posted to the Norman Finkelstein group, end of state. And so there's a horn blaring outside of my so that's not that much of a big difference, a couple more viewers here and there, but it is more viewers on that basis. So I usually post in this group, but also people in the Norman Finkelstein group are tending to be a little more international focused on liberation of Arab people, for example. I don't know. Somebody's device is malfunctioning nearby. I don't know how bad that's affecting the sound here. It's affecting my concentration. Let's see. It necessarily requires a global sea change and a global movement of this massified socio-political kind. And nothing short of a mentality of an uprising, a servile insurrection of past generations, is possibly going to stop this hyper-capitalism and financial capital driven generally extinction level event that we face after 2029. Runaway overheating from the capitalist climate apocalypse. And people who are working in advanced computing in the West, people who are touting advanced computing in the West, in the U.S. particularly, they're people, they're exploitative people. They're neoliberals, far rightists, militarists. They're pretending to be something else. A lot of them are, saying, "I'm a techno optimist. I think good things are going to come out of this." Just like looking at Salvador Allende, right? Salvador Allende was a serious Marxist-Leninist thinker, not like just some jizzball techno-futurist. But that difference between that left liberal impulse not to fight for liberation, not to fight to end oppression, not to pull the linchpin out of that, which is financial capital, private wealth, filthy lucre, but rather to say that good things can come from that system that is killing the planet. A multitude of sins are contained therein. All of the sins, so far as sociopolitics is concerned. All of the fascist states. There was not. We don't refer to fascist states, even though political capitalistic violence of the kind, the origin of capitalism is fundamentally fascistic, right? Capital was created basically to do things like chattel slavery. There was not financial capital before that time. They happened at the same time, building systems like the triangle trade, building systems of exploitation as early as the year 1500. This person, Christopher Columbus, was taking over whole islands, killing everyone on those islands by working them to death. This was the origin of financial capital. And to say that it's ever been anything other than that is to be a bald-faced liar. So, the left liberal in this world, where the pacifist Marxist-Leninist and the left liberal and the crypto-fascist pretending to be a left liberal, those are three quite different people, but they're all doing that labor of the CIA asset, wittingly or unwittingly. And the more you get into tech worlds, the more you're seeing people doing it quite willingly, just being straight up liars. But generally, there's a lot of people in this world who just don't realize that they're serving the evil empire by their nearly every deed and action. And so when 2029, again, after 2029, you're the Walking Dead, right? Your best play after 2029 is to become Luigi Mangione. Just find a billionaire and cut their fucking head off, right? Because there's no path to sustainability after 2029. The distinction then between the pacifistic Marxist-Leninist, the more culpable but still legitimate left liberal to his right, and then the just collection of capitalistic crypto-fascist fucks to their right, is very, very little, because none of this is going to exist after a few years if we do not transform this. So a person who is saying, I'm not a militant, or I'm really worried about what these Antifas are going to do, that's a more violent person by any estimation, whether they think of themselves as a non-violent person or not, because they're upholding the extinction of humankind. Whereas a person who's willing to fight to stop that situation, and a person that's merely a person who has the moral courage and intellectual honesty to recognize what century you're living in, to recognize the ticking time bomb of the capitalist climate apocalypse, and to take action. And in my view, again, the more practical thing to do, not to dismiss the militancy, but I believe that this thing of a people's superintelligence as a workforce multiplier is the most powerful weapon in human history. It can be used for ill in counter-revolutionary ways, as it is by bourgeois tech sectors. It can be used for good, like building a people's superintelligence. And that is something that we can do that will lead to the total emancipation of humankind, and not total extinction or the continued oppression of humankind as we see, as billions of people suffer, so that a few thousand ruling elites can live like kings.